The subway station had been my home for the past 3 months. It wasn't much, but it was shelter from the bitter winter winds that howled through the city streets above. I'd carved out a little nook for myself in a forgotten maintenance alcove, hidden from the eyes of commuters and transit cops alike. It wasn't comfortable, but it was safe. Or so I thought. I remember the night everything changed. The last train had long since rumbled through the station, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the occasional drip of water from the ceiling and the scurrying of rats in the shadows. I was curled up in my sleeping bag, trying to ignore the gnawing hunger in my stomach, when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It was a whisper, so faint I thought I might have imagined it. But then it came again, a little louder this time. Words I couldn't quite make out, spoken in a voice that sent chills down my spine. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty station. "Is someone there?" No response. Just that whisper again, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I fumbled for the flashlight I'd scavenged from a discarded backpack, clicking it on with trembling fingers. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating graffiti-covered walls and litter-strewn floors. Nothing out of the ordinary. But as I swung the light towards the train tracks, my blood ran cold. There, in the tunnel, I saw a figure. It was tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long and joints bent at unnatural angles. For a moment, it just stood there, swaying slightly. Then, with a movement too quick for my eyes to follow, it was gone. I blinked, sure I must be hallucinating. Maybe the hunger was finally getting to me, or maybe I'd breathed in some kind of toxic mold from the damp walls. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen was real. Sleep evaded me that night. Every noise, every shadow made me jump. When the first commuters began trickling into the station the next morning, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Surely, whatever I'd seen couldn't exist in the harsh light of day. As the day wore on, I tried to convince myself that it had all been a bad dream. I went about my usual routine, scrounging for food, avoiding the authorities, and trying to stay warm. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was late afternoon when I saw her. An old woman, hunched and frail, making her way slowly down the platform. There was something off about her, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what. As she passed by my hiding spot, she turned and looked directly at me, her milky eyes seeming to peer into my very soul. "They're coming," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "The forgotten ones. They hunger." Before I could respond, she shuffled away, disappearing into the crowd of rush-hour commuters. I sat there, frozen, her words echoing in my mind. Who were they? What did she mean by the forgotten ones? As night fell and the station emptied once more, I found myself on edge. Every shadow seemed to move, every noise a potential threat. I considered leaving, finding a new place to sleep, but where would I go? The streets were no safer, and at least here I had some shelter from the elements. It was just past midnight when the lights began to flicker. At first, I thought nothing of it. The station's electrical system was old and temperamental. But then they went out completely, plunging the platform into darkness. In the silence that followed, I heard it again, that whisper. But this time, it wasn't just one voice. It was many, a chorus of ethereal murmurs that seemed to press in on me from all sides. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. As the beam cut through the darkness, I saw them. They were everywhere. Figures like the one I'd seen in the tunnel, but dozens of them. Some clung to the ceiling, their elongated limbs wrapped around pipes and cables. Others emerged from the shadows between pillars, their eyeless faces turned towards me. A scream caught in my throat as I scrambled to my feet, abandoning my meager belongings in my desperation to escape. I ran towards the stairs, praying that I could make it to the street above. But they were faster. As I reached the base of the stairs, I felt something cold and clammy wrap around my ankle. I fell hard, my chin slamming into the concrete steps. Dazed and terrified, I rolled onto my back, kicking frantically at the thing that held me. In the dim light filtering down from the street, I could see it clearly now. It might have been human once, but no longer. Its skin was a sickly gray, stretched tight over protruding bones. Where its eyes should have been, there were only empty sockets, and its mouth was filled with needle-sharp teeth. "Please," I whimpered, tears streaming down my face. "Please, let me go." The creature's mouth stretched into a grotesque parody of a smile. When it spoke, its voice was like nails on a chalkboard. "You are one of us now," it hissed. "Forgotten. Abandoned. Left to rot in the dark places of the world." More of the creatures were emerging from the shadows, surrounding me. I could feel their cold, clammy hands on my skin, their fetid breath on my face. "No," I sobbed, struggling weakly against their grip. "I'm not like you. I'm not forgotten. Someone will come for me. Someone will notice I'm gone." The creatures laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Who?" one of them asked, its voice dripping with mockery. "Who in the world above cares for the likes of you?" And in that moment, I realized the terrible truth. I had no one. No family, no friends, no one who would miss me if I disappeared. I was alone in the world, truly forgotten. As the creatures began to drag me back into the darkness of the station, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. There, at the top of the stairs, stood the old woman from earlier. She watched impassively as I was pulled away, her milky eyes betraying no emotion. "Help me," I screamed, reaching out towards her. "Please." But she simply shook her head, her voice carrying clearly despite the distance between us. "I warned you," she said. "The forgotten ones always find their own." Then she was gone, and I was left alone with the creatures. They pulled me deeper into the station, past my little alcove, towards a maintenance door I'd never noticed before. As they opened it, I saw not a storage room or utility area, but a yawning chasm of darkness. The whispers grew louder as we approached the threshold, a cacophony of voices speaking in languages I didn't understand. I could feel something emanating from that darkness, an ancient, hungry presence that made my very soul recoil in terror. As they dragged me across the threshold, I had one final, desperate thought. Would anyone ever know what happened to me? Or would I simply become another statistic, another homeless person who vanished without a trace? The door slammed shut behind us, cutting off the last sliver of light from the station. In the pitch darkness, I felt the creature's grip on me loosen. For a moment, I dared to hope that this was all some terrible nightmare, that I would wake up any second in my sleeping bag. But then I heard it, a sound that defied description, a noise that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth itself. It was a roar, a scream, and a laugh all at once, and it shook me to my very core. "Welcome home," the creatures whispered in unison, their voices filled with a terrible joy. and as that unknowable presence in the darkness turned its attention towards me, I realized that my nightmare was only just beginning. The subway station had been my home, my refuge from the world above. But now, I was trapped in a place far worse than any I could have imagined. In the darkness, I felt something ancient and hungry stirring. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my bones, that whatever happened next would change me forever. The homeless man I had been was gone. What I would become in this realm of forgotten souls and eldritch horrors, only time would tell. As the presence drew closer, its incomprehensible form brushing against the edges of my sanity, I clung to one last, desperate hope that someone, somewhere, would notice I was missing. That they would come looking for me, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to save me from this subterranean hell. But deep down, I knew the truth. In a world that had already forgotten me, what chance did I have of being found? The subway station had swallowed me whole, and in its dark belly, I would either become one of the forgotten ones or be consumed by something far worse. The whispers grew louder, the ancient presence loomed closer, and I felt the last shreds of my old life slipping away. Whatever fate awaited me in this underground nightmare, I knew one thing for certain: I would never look at a subway station the same way again. Time lost all meaning in the darkness. Days, weeks, maybe even months passed as I was subjected to horrors beyond my comprehension. The creatures, the forgotten ones, as I came to know them, were relentless in their torment. They whispered secrets of the universe that no human mind was meant to know, showed me visions of realities that defied logic and sanity. But worst of all was the presence. That ancient, hungry thing that lurked just beyond the edges of perception. It never fully revealed itself, but I could feel its attention on me, probing, testing, waiting. For what, I didn't know, and that uncertainty was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. I tried to resist at first, to hold on to my humanity. I recited my name, my age, fragments of my life before the subway station. But with each passing moment, those memories grew hazier, replaced by the whispers and the visions and the ever-present darkness. Then, one day, or night, it was impossible to tell, something changed. The whispers fell silent, the visions ceased, and even the hungry presence seemed to retreat. In the sudden quiet, I heard something I hadn't heard in what felt like an eternity, a human voice. "Hello? Is anyone down here?" For a moment, I thought I must be hallucinating. But then I heard it again, closer this time. A woman's voice, tinged with fear but determined. "This is Detective Sarah Martinez. If anyone can hear me, please respond." I opened my mouth to call out, but no sound came. My voice had atrophied from disuse, or perhaps it had been taken from me by the forgotten ones. I struggled to my feet, my body weak and unfamiliar after so long in the darkness. As I stumbled towards the voice, I became aware of a faint light in the distance. It grew brighter as I approached, until finally, I saw her. The detective stood at the threshold of the maintenance door, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. When she saw me, her eyes widened in shock. I can only imagine what I must have looked like, emaciated, pale as a corpse, my eyes wild and unfocused. "Oh my God," she breathed. Are you Robert Carlile?" The name stirred something in me. A memory, distant and fragile. Was that who I had been? Robert Carlile, the man who had disappeared from the subway station all those months ago? I nodded weakly, still unable to speak. Relief washed over the detective's face. "We've been looking for you for months," she said, reaching out to me. Come on, let's get you out of here. As her hand touched my arm, a jolt of electricity seemed to pass through me. In that moment, I remembered everything, who I had been, what I had endured, and most terrifyingly, what lurked in the darkness behind me. No, I croaked, my voice raw and unfamiliar. You have to leave. Now. Before they come back. The detective's brow furrowed in confusion. Before who comes back? Mr. Carlile, you're safe now. There's no one else down here. But even as she spoke, I could feel it. The hungry presence, stirring once more. The whispers, starting as a faint murmur but growing louder with each passing second. Run, I managed to say, pushing her towards the door. Please, you have to run. Maybe it was the desperation in my voice, or maybe she finally sensed the malevolent presence that was rapidly approaching. Whatever the reason, Detective Martinez nodded, her face pale but determined. Okay, she said. But you're coming with me. She grabbed my arm and pulled me towards the door. As we crossed the threshold back into the subway station proper, I heard an unearthly shriek behind us. The Forgotten Ones had realized their prey was escaping. We ran through the abandoned station, our footsteps echoing off the tiled walls. Behind us, I could hear the scrabbling of too many limbs, the hissing of creatures that had once been human but were now something far worse. Almost there, Detective Martinez panted as we approached the stairs leading up to the street. Just a little further. But as we reached the base of the stairs, I felt something cold wrap around my ankle. I stumbled, nearly pulling the detective down with me. Go! I shouted, kicking frantically at the thing that held me. Get out of here! For a moment, she hesitated, torn between her duty to rescue me and her instinct for self-preservation. Then, with a look of determination, she pulled out her service weapon. Let him go, she commanded, aiming the gun at the writhing mass of shadows that was quickly engulfing my lower body. The Forgotten Ones laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming wind. Foolish mortal, they hissed in unison. Your weapons cannot harm us. He belongs to us now. To the Hungry One. To the darkness. Detective Martinez fired, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating the horror that surrounded us. The bullets seemed to pass right through the creatures, leaving them unharmed. Please, I begged her. Save yourself. Tell them what's down here. Warn them. She met my eyes, and I saw the moment she realized the truth. There was no saving me. But she could still escape, could still alert the world to the danger that lurked beneath their feet. With a final, anguished look, she turned and ran up the stairs. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me once more was the rectangle of light at the top of the stairs, slowly diminishing as the door swung shut. I was drawn back into the realm of the Forgotten Ones, but something had changed. The brief taste of freedom, the reminder of my humanity, had awakened something within me. As the ancient presence loomed once more, hungry and furious at nearly losing its prey, I felt a spark of defiance ignite in my soul. You don't own me, I whispered into the darkness. I remember who I am now. I am Robert Carlile, and I will find a way to stop you. The presence recoiled, surprised by the sudden resistance. The Forgotten Ones hissed and chittered, their confusion palpable. And in that moment of uncertainty, I saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe I couldn't escape this nightmare, at least not yet. But I could fight back. I could learn their secrets, understand the source of their power. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to warn the world above. As the darkness closed in once more, I clung to that hope like a lifeline. The detective had escaped. She would tell others what she had seen. And someday, somehow, I would find a way to break free of this underground hell. The ancient presence pressed closer, its hunger undimmed. But this time, I didn't cower. I stood my ground, my mind filled with memories of sunlight and fresh air and the world above. I am not forgotten, I declared, my voice growing stronger with each word. And I will not let you win. The battle that followed was not one of physical strength, but of will and sanity. The forgotten ones assaulted my mind with visions of cosmic horror, with whispers of secrets that could drive a man mad. The hungry presence tried to devour my very essence, to strip away everything that made me human. But I fought back with every ounce of strength I had. I clung to my memories, to my name, to the hope that Detective Martinez had kindled. And slowly, impossibly, I began to push them back. Hours or days might have passed, time had no meaning in this place. But eventually, I felt something shift. The pressure eased, the whispers faded, and for the first time since I had been dragged into this nightmare, I felt a moment of true silence. In that silence, I heard something. A rhythmic thumping, distant but growing closer. It took me a moment to recognize it for what it was: footsteps. Human footsteps. Hope surged within me. Had Detective Martinez returned with help? Was this finally the moment of my rescue? But as the footsteps drew nearer, I realized something was wrong. They were too heavy, too deliberate. And there was something else, a sound underneath the footsteps that made my blood run cold, the scraping of metal on concrete. A figure emerged from the darkness, and I felt my heart sink. It was a man, or what had once been a man. He was tall and gaunt, his skin pale and mottled with strange, pulsing veins. In one hand, he dragged an enormous, rusted blade that looked like it had been fashioned from a piece of the subway track itself. But it was his eyes that truly terrified me. They glowed with an eerie, pale light, and in their depths, I saw the same ancient hunger that had haunted me for so long. "Robert Carlile," the figure said, its voice a rasping whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The one who dares to resist. The one who thinks he can escape." I tried to back away, but found myself rooted to the spot. Whether by fear or some unseen force, I couldn't move. What are you?" I managed to ask. The figure's mouth stretched into a grotesque smile, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "I am the conductor," it said. "The shepherd of the forgotten. The voice of the hungry one. And you, Robert Carlile, have caused quite a stir in our little kingdom." It raised the massive blade, the metal shrieking as it scraped against the ground. "But no more. Your defiance ends now. Your hope dies here. And your soul will feed the hungry one for an eternity." As the conductor advanced, blade raised high, I felt something deep within me snap. All the fear, all the horror I had endured, all the rage at what had been done to me, it all came rushing to the surface in a tidal wave of emotion. And with it came power. Power I didn't understand, but instinctively knew how to use. I raised my hands, and to my amazement, tendrils of darkness shot from my fingertips. They wrapped around the conductor's blade, wrenching it from its grasp. The creature shrieked in fury and lunged for me, but I was faster. With a thought, I opened a rift in the air, a tear in the very fabric of reality. Through it, I could see the subway station, empty and dark but blessedly normal. I emerged onto the street, blinking in the harsh glare of the morning sun. The city bustled around me, people rushing to work or school, completely unaware of the horrors that lurked beneath their feet. But I knew. And now, I had the power to do something about it. As I walked down the crowded sidewalk, my mind raced with possibilities. I could find Detective Martinez, tell her everything I had learned. We could expose the truth, warn people about the danger. But even as I considered this, I felt the darkness within me pulse with eagerness. There was so much more I could do now. So much power at my fingertips. I paused at a street corner, watching the flow of humanity around me. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, blissfully ignorant of the terrors that existed just out of sight. A small smile played across my lips. Yes, I would warn them. I would protect them from the horrors below. But I would do it my way. After all, who better to fight the darkness than someone who carried a piece of it within them? As I melted into the crowd, I couldn't help but wonder, was I still Robert Carlile, the forgotten homeless man? Or had I become something else entirely? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, the war against the forgotten ones and their hungry master had only just begun. And I intended to win, no matter the cost.